Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry I cannot be here again today, but I feel very confident that solving absolute value equations is something that you're not going to have any problem with. But what we want to do is make sure we remember the definition of absolute value, and then use that definition, use that idea of what an absolute value is to solve these equations. All right, so let's take a look at our first example. I'm going to get you some directions here. To solve an absolute value equation, you need to isolate the absolute value. And so that's this idea of getting the absolute value by itself first, and then creating and solving two equations. We should always have two answers. And so once we take a look at example 1, we should have a really good idea, a really good feel for why we have two answers for that. So when we look at this, we have got the absolute value of x equals 7. Whenever we solve an equation, we're trying to find what value of x would make this statement true. So I need to know what numbers can I plug in for x that would give me an answer of 7. So what numbers have an absolute value of 7? So if we think of that definition, absolute value is the distance from 0. And so we've been looking at number lines quite a bit already this week. We've got 0. I can go 7 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so 7 is 7 spaces from 0. But I can't just think of the right-hand side of 0. I have to remember that we have the left-hand side of 0. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I land at -7. So this is why we have two answers to our absolute value equations, because we have the distance to the right of 0, and we have the distance to the left of 0. But what we need to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, is that we're talking about distance, and distance is always positive. And so that's why your absolute value will always have to equal a positive number there. Now, x itself doesn't have to. What two numbers did we find here are equal, that are 7 spaces from 0? We would say x is equal to 7 and -7. So this is our answer. All right? Pretty nice. This works out very nicely when just x is equal to 7. We have this absolute value. We don't really need to think of writing two equations. We can mentally see, we can draw, we can diagram where we have 7 spaces from 0. But when we take a look at example 2, we've got a little bit more going on there, because we're not just looking at x being equal to 7. We want x plus 3 equals to 7. We want this value still to be 7 spaces from 0. So no matter what's inside of here, I want it to be equal to 7. And so we know that x plus 3 can equal 7, because that 7 that we had over here was 7 spaces from 0. But we also know that at -7, on the left-hand side of 0, I'm still 7 spaces from 0. So I have x plus 3 being equal to a -7. This is where our two equations from. Focusing on how do I get x plus 3 equal to +7 that is 7 spaces from 0, and how do I get x plus 3 to equal -7 that is still 7 spaces from 0. So I'm writing my two equations, one with the right-hand side of 0, one with the left-hand side of 0. All right, this is for the right being positive, and this is for the left, it's going left of 0 and being negative. And now we just solve these simple equations. -3 from each side. X is equal to 4. -3 from each side. Be careful, guys. Notice I'm not getting 4 and -4. It's not going to be a number in its opposite. All right? Because -7 minus 3 is equal to -10. So we do have to take the time to set up these two equations. We use the number in its opposite for finding my space from 0. 7 spaces to the right at +7, 7 spaces to the left of 0 at -7. Then we do the algebra, and then we can say x is equal to 4 and -10. Notice in both these problems, if I were to look at the equation that we started off with, the only thing on this left-hand side was the absolute value. The only thing on the left-hand side here was that absolute value. If we take a look at example 3 now, I've got something along with the absolute value. So I don't know my distance from 0. The only thing that describes the distance from 0 is the absolute value. And right now I've got the absolute value plus 5. So I say, okay, let me get this absolute value by itself. How do I undo adding 5? The same way you guys have all year long. I undo adding 5 by subtracting 5. So I'm going to subtract 5. I then have the absolute value of 3x minus 2 is equal to 7. I must like this number 7 a lot when we make up our notes for these. You can be more than just 7 spaces from 0. You can be less than 7 spaces from 0, guys, so don't worry about that. But I do know that I want my absolute value. Now, that's all I have over there. I can, in essence, cover up this, think of covering up the 3x minus 2 and just thinking of it in terms of the absolute value. I need to be 7 spaces from 0. And we know that that happens at 3x minus 2 being equal to positive 7 for the right-hand side of 0. We know it happens at 3x minus 2 equal to negative 7 for the left-hand side of 0. Now we've got a two-step equation that we're going to have to solve. So we're going to add 2 to each side. 3x is equal to 9. X is equal to 3. Go over here, the same algebra steps, but because you start off by adding this 2 to a negative 7, I'm getting a different value here. 3x equals a negative 5. Divide by 3. And x is equal to a negative 5/3. So x can equal 3 or negative 5/3. Those will give us our two places next that the two values of x that will be 7 spaces from 0. All right, let's take a look at example 4 here. I've got the plus 15 that I need to get rid of. So I'm going to minus 15 from each side. So that leaves me with the absolute value of x plus 11 is equal to negative 9. So I'm trying to figure out where in the number line am I negative 9 spaces from 0. I'm going to have you guys think here for a little bit, but I need to go back a couple of screens and show you something I wrote down earlier. We said absolute value is the distance from 0, but then I told you guys distance is always positive. I don't care whether I go to the left of 0 or to the right of 0. I'm still counting 7 spaces. I don't count negative 7 spaces. I counted 7 spaces here to the left and landed at negative 7. So my distance always has to be positive. So when I'm at this point and I'm trying to figure out how do I get negative 9 spaces from 0, I can't have a negative distance, even if I go backwards. And I always use this example, those of you who run track and field, even if you run in the opposite direction, you still run a 100-meter dash. Okay, it doesn't matter what direction I walk at the end of my driveway, whether I go to the left or go to the right. I'm still traveling a positive distance. Distance cannot be negative. And so that means for this problem, there is no solution because my absolute value is equal to a negative. All right. We've got 2 on your own. I'm going to pause. I'm going to work these out here a little bit, but I'm going to ask that whoever's in charge of playing that substitute pauses the video here for a little bit to give you guys some work time on that so that you guys can work on your own. I would think these problems should take you guys no more than a couple of minutes for those. And just like any equation, ladies and gentlemen, we can always plug these answers back in and check them. So we could take 3 and plug that in here. The absolute value of 9 minus 2. 9 minus 2 is 7. And then the absolute value of 7 plus 5 is 12. That's the 12 we wanted to have here. So for those of you who are already done with the on your own, while we're waiting for other people to finish, you can go through and check those. But now would be a good time to pause. All right, I need to get the absolute value by itself, so I'm going to add 7. At the absolute value of x is equal to 3. That means I'm sorry, this should be 10, not 3. That means I need to be 10 spaces from 0, so x is equal to 10, or x is equal to negative 10. Here my absolute value is not by itself, it's not isolated, so I'm going to subtract 3. So I get 2x minus 4 is equal to 2, the absolute value. That means I want to be 2 spaces from 0. So my 2x minus 4 can equal positive 2, which is 2 spaces to the right, or my 2x minus 4 can equal negative 2, which is 2 spaces to the left. I'm going to add 4. And then divide by 2. Have x is equal to 3, so hopefully we're looking pretty good at this point with these 2 on your own, ladies and gentlemen. And we get 2x is equal to negative 2 plus 4 is 2. Divide by 2. And we get x is equal to 1. So x can equal 3, or x can equal 1. Those are our solutions. Your assignment should still be what it is on the agenda. We haven't deviated from that. So if I pull up your agenda and take a look at that, your assignment is page 356, numbers 19 through 39. So after your quiz today, ladies and gentlemen, you can get your books out and start working on that. Best of luck on everything, ladies and gentlemen. I think you are more than ready for that quiz, and so do your best, and I will see you on Monday.